Welcome back. Now I have with me virtually Mr. Kayode Ogundamisi, a UK-based commentator on Nigeria and global issues. Mr. Kayode, you are welcome to Inside Sources.
Thank you. Thanks, Lalo. Thanks for inviting me.
All right. Thank you. So the way I normally start the conversation is to say, if you look at where Nigeria is today, right now, do you think that the country is on the right direction that will lead us to the great Nigeria that many of us envisage?
The honest answer is no. But the right question is the wrong question. The right question is to acknowledge the reality, which is Nigeria is like a car that has crashed in the in the rough patch of the road, and the task is how to get it out of that rough ditch and put it on the road. So it's until it gets on the road that you can put it on the right
direction.
And talk about
I like
direction.
that. That's a new one. So you believe that the way things are, it's like there has been some kind of an accident and the vehicle itself is crashed. So using that analogy, what else or what next do you think has to happen?
There must be a radical acknowledgement of the fundamental indices that would make it impossible for any Nigerian leader to move Nigeria forward. And that acknowledgement is on the structure of the country, the expensive nature of its democracy, the poor, the lack of enforcement of law that is impossible to enforce, where both leaders and followers are alike in behavior towards the country, where you have majority leaders bad, majority followers bad, the country can't move forward. So we need to together, both as leaders, as followers, agree that there's a need for a fundamental change. Let me highlight the national questions. The national question, in the absence of a buoyant economy, people start talking about their primordial Yoruba, Igbo, Ingala, marginalization. When the economy is robust, people don't talk about those primordial sentiments. So that's an indication that there's something fundamentally wrong with the structure of our country, and leadership, successive leadership have failed to acknowledge that until we fix that fundamental, then it's impossible. Even if any leader with the best intention, it is impossible to move the country forward, because any radical policy you make can be misinterpreted, politicized, and it will hit the brick wall. Is it security actions? Misinterpreted, politicized, religious interpretations are read into it. So we need to get that vehicle out of the ditch first.
Interesting. So your point seems to be that you believe that we need to restructure the country. Now, if that is if that's the point you're trying to make, can you just give a little bit detail on how that structure, what should be in the new structure?
So successive government have made some short-term effort, to devolve power, to the subnationals, like the state government. The question is, do we have a local government? Local government is completely eradicated. So people talk about restructuring from federal to state. We know that the local government is the closest to the people. Even issues as community policing, the police knowing members of the community, providing basic needs that affect the common people, where there's how many state governors or how many states have been able to conduct elections? Most of them appoint caretaker head of local government. So the third that tier of government has completely disappeared in our national politics.
Even just to enrich your point, even when the elections are held, we see that the ruling party always wins, and
absolutely
win many times completely everything available.
Yeah. So if that vital organ that is closest to the people has been commandeered into the personal property of whoever is the governor of the state. So for example, my local government is Alimosho. My local government chairman is not answerable to the people there because he's answerable to the state governor just across the country. I just use that as an example. So we need to go back before we even talk about this issue of restructuring in the point of regional government, taking some from the exclusive list to the concurrent list. Where we have now, even this federating unit that we have now, there is a part of the most important aspect of governance has disappeared. So everybody's running into Abuja. The president decides who gets a borehole in a local government. Those kind of conversations, we need to start serious in addressing that. And then after I talked about how expensive our democracy is, we spend so much money servicing elected officials, at the expense of the people. We need to get to the point where we make political appointments, elective positions attractive only to the best in our society. So something almost like a part-time job, basically. So if you're going there to serve. There are no expectations that you would go and borrow ₦1 billion from a bank to run as a member of House of Representatives, because you know that once you become a member of House of Representatives, there are opportunities to get 10 times that amount to pay back the money. There's also, people talk about corruption, but we focus on corruption based on elected officials. We don't talk about the role of the banks. We don't talk about the role of the custom officer at the border area. So as a people, we need to first decide we want to get this country out of the ditch that we are now. Otherwise, whatever reforms you make, whatever efforts you make, it's going to just be like, when you have a wound and all you're doing is just putting plaster on it without applying the necessary medication that would let the wound to heal. And then that issue of a sense of belonging for every Nigerian to be part of Nigeria. So we must address those, have those conversations, honest conversations, and quality decisions needs to be made, and brave decisions really need to be arrived at by leadership at all levels. Because right now everybody just talk about Jonathan, Buhari, Tinubu. State governors, people are not holding them to account. They collect revenues from the federal government. People no longer hold them to account. There's a focus on Abuja. And that is why we need to actually have a rethink on the structure of the country.
Thank you very much. Quite interesting that these are some of the, recurrent points that have come up even in this conversation, especially the place of local government. And some of the pushback that we get from some of the governors is that in the federation, it's the subnationals that are the federating units. And it doesn't include local government, and so you see quite a bit of resistance from the governors, even when the federal government is trying to say, let's have local government autonomy. Let the resources, the funding for local government, let it go into a different account where states are even supposed to contribute. But what you have today, essentially, in many of the states, is that the state governors control. They are completely in control of local government, to the extent that you said that the chairman doesn't even have a lot of initiative. My question to you then is that, so what do we need to do about these governors? How do we? Do we need to change our laws? How do we get the governors to let the local government breathe? Keo.
Yeah. Well. The sad news is that we cannot. The good news is that if they recognize that the current system we are running is going to lead to a complete collapse of the country and, also threaten their own existence, then they will be part of that solution. Like you talk about that fight back. The fight back is because they don't even recognize how the current system work against their own interest in terms of just survival, as individuals. They're not going to be governors for 8 years. But when you step down, that's why you see a lot of people step down from office, and then it suddenly becomes obvious that there's a solution. So they first need to recognize that they are stakeholders, so even if it's a sense of, without getting personal, the current government as the most members of the political class that have championed about restructuring. The current president, did not only champion restructuring, demonstrated, the need for restructuring.
It was in the trenches with people like you and myself.
Through federalism. And when he became governor, he challenged the federal government on the local government reforms, and it was successful up to the Supreme Court. So now that we have someone there who sort of, technically, historically believed in that, he can use his political leadership to have a buy-in.
Interesting. So let's move to political reforms. Do you think that the incumbent president should work on bringing, one, a new constitution, and two, try to see how we can further improve our electoral laws?
I think the most important one will be the electoral law. It needs to be fair. From 1999 till date, we've made improvements in our electoral laws. The introduction of partial electronic voting like beavers and what have you. But we need to increase the speed, because if where you'd get it right is electing the right leaders into office and making the election less expensive for people. So I think, irrespective of the controversies towards how this current president emerged, he will do himself a lot of good by expediting those electoral reforms. And I think there are acts that are pending in the National Assembly that can be looked into, and we should learn from every mistake in all our elections. So I think that's priority. In terms of political reforms, I would expect that would be the number one priority of this administration. Let me put it this way, Laolu. The last government, our expectations was that anti-corruption was going to be the key element. In fact, when some of us were campaigning for Buhari, we were saying that once Buhari comes in, corrupt people will take their flight voluntarily and run out of Nigeria. But obviously, from everything that is coming out, the opposite is the case. As a matter of fact, it is in areas where I did not give the government credit that they made a lot of achievement, which is infrastructure. Do you want to talk about the Lagos railway line and what have you? So with this government, in its own case, the expectations are that this current president is deft and is quite grounded in the issue of the need for political reform, electoral reform, and making election less expensive, giving people the fair freedom to. So things can be done. And I can give another example. The election that brought Yar'Adua into power was quite controversial.
Right.
But that president started initiating reforms that was shocking. People were like, he was accused of being rigged into office, but it proved a lot of people wrong by trying to put reforms into place. So I think the onus is on this current leadership to surprise, quote and unquote, naysayers, and like I said to people, even for those of us who did not really campaign for this president, it's important that we pray that they succeed, and whilst we hold them to account, because the lack of success of any president, irrespective of where they come from, irrespective of whether you support them or you did not support them, has direct impact either positively or negatively on everyone. When kidnappers go on the road, they don't ask people they kidnap, are you a Labour Party or PDP or APC? Neither do they ask them if they are Christians or Muslims. Criminals and criminal elements pick people at opportunistic rates, for their own self-interest. So while people should continue to hold the government to account, we need to hope that they succeed, because it's important for the country. When you run a government down, what are you going to inherit when you get there? Really, so I am hoping that they would shape up, because time is running against Nigeria. You look at the state of the economy, really, and how difficult things are. Some of it historical, but most of it as a result of, whether you agree with it or not, the reforms this government is putting in place. It's got a very direct impact on the common man on the street. Oil subsidy removal, monetary policies, and what have you. And they need to recognize that people need to start feeling some ease, from those reforms. And they should also see that those in government are paying their own price, for putting the same sacrifice that they expect of the followers. Once that is done, I think Nigerians, people who give their public officers a chance. If they don't, you'll be seeing a lot of people being stoned on the street.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's what we're trying to avoid, to let the Nigerian political elite to understand that it is in their best interest to sort out the country. Last question, as our time is running up, Mr. Kayode, how do you describe what happened in Ibadan recently, where you have some folks?
Okay, so I've got experience in this. So, I was the founding Secretary General of the Odua People's Congress.
Yes.
And that explains my sympathy to self-determination activists across the country, whether it's Biafra and what have you. But I've always said, and this is based on experience, that violence will never get you anywhere. It will never give you what you want. It will alienate you from the people you claim you want to fight for. You would cause your people destruction, blood, and what have you. And what happened in Ibadan is actually an abuse of what self-determination is about. It's a coup, basically, armed, invading the state assembly, wearing military uniform. So my appeal to everyone is that they need to, irrespective of if you want a republic, you cannot go about it through violent means. And because the result is the Nigerian state, no matter how weak it is, no matter the president, even a president that believes in tearing Nigeria apart, once he swore to become the president of the country and sworn to that constitution, his first duty is to protect and to the territorial integrity of Nigeria. So it's quite unfortunate. And I'm hoping that this government would also have an indirect way of engaging a lot of these elements, to try to understand what they're talking about, what they want. And let me use this opportunity to say the issue of the IPOB and Nnamdi Kanu, which is pending, is an albatross. It was an albatross on the last government, it's still an albatross on this government, and there must be an effort, to find a political solution, across broad, Anyone who raises arms against the state, of course, the state will have the right to fight back within internationally recognized laws. But it was quite unfortunate what happened in Ibadan, and it should be condemned by any peace-loving Nigerian.
Very, 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 very true. And I agree entirely with you that what happened in Ibadan should be condemned. I think it's quite a bit of worry that you will have people behave at that level of, I don't know whether to call it ignorance or clownishness, Yes. But I believe, and I'm sure you also believe, that Nigeria as a nation will prevail. Thank you so much, Mr. Kayode Ogundamisi.
Thank you, Laulu,
for coming to Inside Sources. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.